Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, jury selection is underway in the first criminal trial for former President Donald Trump. More about why prosecutors want to hold him in contempt. Plus, it's tax day in the U.S., and if you haven't filed your 2023 tax return with the IRS yet, don't panic. There's still time to rectify the situation.
Plus, we are tracking rounds of showers and thunderstorms. Those details coming up as Mountain News at 5:30 starts now.
Dedicated to Southern and Eastern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News at 5:30.
Good evening, I'm Steve Hensley. Pretrial arguments and jury selection began today in the Donald Trump hush money trial. It's the first ever criminal trial of a former U.S. president. CBS's Jared Hill is at the courthouse in Lower Manhattan with the latest.
Returning from a lunch break, a thumbs up from former President Trump as he began the second half of day one in his hush money trial. It's the first of 4 criminal trials the Republican presidential candidate faces. Earlier, he slammed at the proceedings, which could take more than 6 weeks.
This is really an attack on a political opponent, that's all it is.
Trump faces 34 felony counts, accused of falsifying business records to hide payments former fixer Michael Cohen made to adult film star Stormy Daniels ahead of the 2016 presidential election. Trump has pleaded not guilty.
This is an assault on America.
Monday afternoon, the first batch of 96 potential jurors enter the courtroom. More than 500 Manhattan residents are there to be considered for the 12 spots. The lengthy juror questionnaire asks if they've ever attended a Trump rally or if they follow the former president on social media.
The defense is very interested in seeing if they can show that through the jury selection that they can't really get people who might be quote unquote fair and impartial. They will continue to move for a change of venue.
Prosecutors asked the judge to hold Trump in contempt for allegedly violating his gag order with 4 social media posts attacking Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen, both potential witnesses. Prosecutors want the posts removed and Trump to pay a fine. They've asked the judge to remind Trump that he could be jailed for further violations. The former president's defense claimed he was only responding to attacks, but the judge said he did not recall an exception to the gag order. Jared Hill, CBS News, New York.
The judge has set aside next Tuesday for contempt of court arguments regarding a possible gag order violation. Trump Media and Technology Group's stock plummeted 15% today after the company announced a massive offering of new shares. The stock value had rocketed higher leading up to that initial public offering, but it's lost more than 60% of its value from its peak on March 26th. A new stock offering now could help the struggling company stay afloat, but there's a catch. This new offering of 21.5 million shares would decrease the value of the current shares. Major changes coming to immigration law across Tennessee. Governor Bill Lee signing a law requiring police across the state to report any illegal immigrants they come across to ICE and help turn them in. Right now, law enforcement is not specifically required to report illegal immigrants to the government, but experts say most, if not all, law enforcement agencies in the state already do this. Governor Lee says it's just common sense and will help keep Tennessee safe.
It's important that the appropriate authorities are notified of the status of that individual. I think that makes sense.
Supporters of the bill say that state officers should help more in enforcing immigration. Opponents argue the bill is broad and confusing and could embolden rogue officers to target immigrant families. The Supreme Court has declined to hear an appeal from a Black Lives Matter organizer facing a damages lawsuit. DeRay McKesson is being sued by an officer injured in a Louisiana protest following the 2016 killing of Alton Sterling. Lawyers for the officer said McKesson planned an unlawful protest and the violence was foreseeable. The lawyers argued the First Amendment does not protect against damage claims if an organizer's actions are negligent, illegal, and dangerous. One of the seats at the U.S. Supreme Court was vacant this morning. Justice Clarence Thomas was a no-show when the High Court heard oral arguments regarding a public corruption case. Prior to the start, Chief Justice John Roberts announced Thomas would not be there. Roberts gave no reason for Thomas's absence, and there was no comment from the Supreme Court on the issue. The 75-year-old is the most senior associate justice on the U.S. Supreme Court. Police in New Orleans are investigating a mass shooting that happened outside a nightclub last night. One woman was killed while 11 others were injured during the shooting that occurred just before midnight local time. A witness inside the club at the time of the shooting says there was a lot of panic and chaos at the scene. Governor Jeff Landry and his wife sent out a statement saying they were praying for the victims and their families. A child was killed during a shooting in Chicago this past weekend. Police say the shooting happened near West 52nd Street and South Damon Avenue. 7 other people were injured during the shooting, including 3 children. Chicago Police Area 1 Deputy Chief Don Jerome says the child that was killed was a 7-year-old girl. Jerome says she was shot in the head. A judge in New Mexico has sentenced the armorer on the movie Rust to 18 months in prison. Hannah Gutierrez-Reed was convicted of involuntary manslaughter last month in the deadly shooting of 42-year-old Helena Hutchins, the film's cinematographer. At the sentencing Monday, a visibly emotional Gutierrez-Reed listened to victim impact statements from Hutchins' family and friends. The 26-year-old addressed the court before learning she'd be serving the maximum sentence.
My heart aches for the Hutchins family and friends and colleagues as well. And it has since the day this tragedy occurred. Helena has been and always will be an inspiration to me. I understand she was taken too soon, and I pray that you all find peace.
Alec Baldwin was holding the prop gun on the set of the film in 2021 when it fired a live round of ammunition during rehearsal, killing Hutchins and wounding director Joel Souza.
Well, the calendar may say April, but it feels more like May across the region on this Monday. A live look at First Alert Pinpoint Doppler. We are dry under some sunshine, but notice as we go back to the east over portions of Virginia and West Virginia, we are tracking a few severe thunderstorm warnings, and this is all thanks to a boundary close to the Ohio River. Notice as we zoom out, we are tracking this boundary close to Cincinnati, and that could spark possibly a few showers and maybe a thunderstorm or two in our region as we go into this evening. Also tonight, now most of us see no big issues, but we do have a level 2 slight risk of severe weather in place for most of our region. So again, we are tracking the potential for a few showers and maybe a strong storm or two, but it's not looking to be a widespread issue. And those main threats will be strong straight line winds, large hail, and possibly some heavier rainfall as well when those heavier showers move through. The big story, though, today, we are warm. Most of us in the middle to lower 80s, up to 83 for Pikeville, 84 in Jackson, and 85 in Manchester, 86 over in Harlan. So we are tracking some very warm weather, and we stay mild as we go into this evening as well. Those temperatures in the upper 70s to lower 80s, the middle 70s later on this evening. And again, we are tracking the potential for a stray shower or thunderstorm. More details on that busy weather pattern coming up in just a few minutes. Steve?
Cameron, thank you. For most Americans, time is running out to file your tax return with the IRS. If you still owe income tax for last year, the good news is you still have options before being penalized for failing to file. CNN's Ivan Rodriguez has more on what people need to know.
Tax day is here, and if you haven't filed yet, you're not alone. But experts say if you haven't started, you may actually want to wait.
Haste makes waste. And when we rush to do things, that's when mistakes can happen. Mistakes will either cost you refunds, tax dollars, or may cause you problems from the IRS later.
Tom O'Sabin with the National Association of Tax Professionals recommends filing a 6-month extension by midnight to give you and your tax preparer the opportunity to prepare it correctly. But in order to avoid mounting penalties, O'Sabin advises it's best to send a payment to the IRS before the deadline that best approximates what you think is due. Taking a look at last year's tax return could help.
If you owe money and you don't have that postmark today, the IRS is going to charge you interest and, failure to pay penalties that are going to start assessing tomorrow.
If you're afraid you can't pay, O'Sabin says filing is still critical.
The IRS wants to work with you to get your tax obligations satisfied. And in doing that, the first thing they've got to have is the tax return.
And for those late filers who are due a refund, there are no penalties for missing the deadline and possibly some benefits.
You can wait up to 3 years after the original due date to file your return. And not only will the IRS give you your refund, they'll pay you interest on that refund.
But make sure you file before the 3 years is up. Otherwise, you forfeit your refund. I'm Ivan Rodriguez reporting.
Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, there are many factors that go into a good credit score, but some are more important than others. What you should focus on if you're looking to increase your score.
Plus, a shower or storm cannot be ruled out this evening, but higher rain chances are looming for midweek. Those details coming up.